Teachings of Lord Caitanya, the Golden Avatar, a treatise on factual spiritual life, by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder, Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Chapter 31, The Supreme Perfection. Whatever position one may have, if he is fully conversant with the science of Krishna, Krishna consciousness, he can become a bona fide spiritual master, an initiator or a teacher of the science. In other words, one can become a bona fide spiritual master if he has sufficient knowledge of the science of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. Becoming such a spiritual master does not depend on a particular position in society or on birth. This is the conclusion of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu, and it is in accordance with the Vedic injunctions. On the strength of this conclusion, Lord Caitanya, previously known as Vishvambhara, accepted a spiritual master, Ishvarapuri, who was a sannyasi. Similarly, Lord Nityananda Prabhu and Sri Advaita Acharya also accepted a sannyasi as their spiritual master, namely Madhavendra Puri, who was a disciple of Lakshmi Pati Tirtha. Similarly, another great Acharya, Sri Rasikananda, accepted Sri Shyamananda as his spiritual master, although Shyamananda was not born in a Brahmin family. So also did Ganga Narayana Chakravarti accept Narottam Das Thakur as his spiritual master. In ancient days, there was even a hunter named Dharma who became a spiritual master for many people. There are clear instructions in the Mahabharata and Srimad Bhagavatam 7:1135 stating that a person should be accepted as a Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Shudra according to his personal qualifications and not his birth. For example, if a man is born in a Brahmin family but his personal qualifications are those of a Shudra, he should be accepted as a Shudra. Similarly, if a person is born in a Shudra family but has the qualifications of a Brahmin, he should be accepted as a Brahmin. All Shastric injunctions, as well as the versions of great sages and authorities, establish that a bona fide spiritual master is not necessarily a Brahmin by caste. The only qualification is that he be conversant with the science of Krishna, Krishna consciousness. That alone makes one perfectly eligible to become a spiritual master. This is the conclusion of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu in his discussions with Ramananda Roy. In the Hari Bhakti Vilas, it is stated that if one bona fide spiritual master is born in a Brahmin family and another qualified spiritual master is born in a Shudra family, one should accept the one who is born in a Brahmin family. This statement serves as a social compromise, but it has nothing to do with spiritual understanding. This injunction is applicable only for those who consider social status more important than spiritual status. It is not for people who are spiritually serious. A serious person would accept Caitanya Mahaprabhu's instruction that anyone conversant with the science of Krishna must be accepted as a spiritual master, regardless of his social position. There is an injunction in the Padma Purana which states that though a highly devoted spiritually advanced devotee of the Lord may have been born in a family of dog-eaters, he can be a spiritual master, but that a highly elevated person born in a Brahmin family cannot be a spiritual master unless he is a devotee of the Lord. A person born in a Brahmin family may be conversant with all of the rituals of the Vedic scriptures, but if he is not a pure devotee, he cannot be a spiritual master. In all Shastras, the chief qualification of a bona fide spiritual master is that he be conversant with the science of Krishna. Lord Caitanya, therefore, requested Ramananda Roy to go on teaching him without hesitation, not considering Lord Caitanya's position as a sannyasi. Thus, Lord Caitanya urged him to continue speaking on the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Quote, "Because you are asking me to speak of the pastimes of Radha and Krishna," Ramananda Roy humbly submitted, "I will obey your order. I will speak in whatever way you like." Unquote. Thus, Ramananda Roy humbly submitted himself as a puppet before Lord Caitanya, the puppet master. He only wanted to dance according to the will of Caitanya Mahaprabhu. He compared his tongue to a stringed instrument, saying, quote, "You are the player of that instrument," unquote. Thus, as Lord Caitanya would play, Ramananda Roy would vibrate the sound. Ramananda Roy said that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of all incarnations and the cause of all causes. There are innumerable Vaikuntha planets, innumerable incarnations and expansions of the Supreme Lord, and innumerable universes also. And of all these existences, the Supreme Lord Krishna is the only source. His transcendental body is composed of eternity, bliss, and knowledge, and he is known as the son of Maharaj Nanda and the inhabitant of Goloka Vrindavan. He is full with 6 opulences, all wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. In the Brahma Samhita 5.1, it is confirmed that Krishna is the Supreme Lord, the Lord of all lords, and that his transcendental body is Satchid Ananda. No one is the source of Krishna, but Krishna is the source of everyone. He is the supreme cause of all causes and a resident of Vrindavan. He is also very attractive, just like Cupid. One can worship him by the Kama Gayatri mantra. In the Brahma Samhita, the transcendental land of Vrindavan is described as being always spiritual. That spiritual land is populated by goddesses of fortune who are known as gopis. These are all beloved of Krishna, and Krishna is the only lover of all those gopis. The trees of that land are all desire trees. You can have anything you want from any tree. The land is made of touchstone, and the water is nectar. In that land all speech is song, all walking is dancing, and the constant companion is the flute. Everything is self-illuminated, just like the sun and moon in this material world. The human form of life is meant for understanding this transcendental land of Vrindavan, and one who is fortunate should cultivate knowledge of Vrindavan and its residents. In that supreme abode of Krishna are Sarabi cows who overflood the land with milk. Since not even a moment there is misused, there is no past, present, or future. An expansion of that Vrindavan is present on this earth, and superior devotees worship the earthly Vrindavan as non-different from the supreme abode. No one can appreciate Vrindavan without being highly elevated in spiritual knowledge, Krishna consciousness. According to ordinary experience, Vrindavan appears to be just like an ordinary tract of land. But in the eyes of a highly elevated devotee, it is as good as the original Vrindavan. A great saintly Acharya has sung, quote, "When will my mind be cleared of all dirty things, so I will be able to see Vrindavan as it is? And when will I be able to understand the literature left by the 6 Goswamis, so that I will be able to understand the transcendental pastimes of Radha and Krishna," unquote. The loving affairs between Krishna and the gopis in Vrindavan are also transcendental. Such affairs appear like the ordinary lusty affairs of this material world, but there is a gulf of difference between the moods of Vrindavan and those of this material world. In the material world, there may be the temporary awakening of lust, but it disappears after so-called satisfaction. In the spiritual world, the love between the gopis and Krishna is constantly increasing. That is the difference between the love in the transcendental world and the lust in the material world. The lust, or so-called love, arising out of this body is as temporary as the body itself. But the love arising from the eternal soul in the spiritual world is on the spiritual platform, and since the spirit soul is eternal, that love is also eternal. Therefore, Krishna is addressed as the evergreen Cupid. Lord Krishna is worshipped by the Gayatri mantra, and the specific mantra by which he is worshipped is called Kama Gayatri. The Vedic literature explains that sound vibration which can elevate one from mental concoction is called Gayatri. The Kama Gayatri mantra is composed of 24.5 syllables thus: Kling Kama Devaya Vidmahe Pushpa Banaya Di Mahi Tan No Nangaha prachodayat. This Kama Gayatri is received from the spiritual master when the disciple is advanced in chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In other words, this Kama Gayatri mantra and Samskara, or reformation of a perfect Brahman, are offered by the spiritual master when he sees that his disciple is advanced in spiritual knowledge. Even then, the Kama Gayatri is not uttered under certain circumstances. In any case, the chanting of Hare Krishna is sufficient to elevate one to the highest spiritual platform. In the Brahma Samhita, a nice description of the sound of Krishna's flute is given. Quote, when Krishna began to play on his flute, the sound vibration entered into the ear of Brahma as the Vedic mantra Om. Unquote. This Om is composed of 3 letters, A, U, and M, and it describes our relationship with the Supreme Lord, our activities by which we can achieve the highest perfection of love and the actual position of love on the spiritual platform. When the sound vibration of Krishna's flute is expressed through the mouth of Brahma, it becomes Gayatri. Thus, by being influenced by the sound vibration of Krishna's flute, Brahma, the supreme creature and first living entity of this material world, was initiated as a Brahman. That Brahma was initiated as a Brahman by the flute of Krishna is confirmed by Srila Jiva Goswami. When Brahma was enlightened by the Gayatri mantra through Krishna's flute, he attained all Vedic knowledge. Acknowledging the benediction offered to him by Krishna, he became the original spiritual master of all living entities. The word Klim, added to the Gayatri mantra, is explained in the Brahma Samhita as the transcendental seed of love of Godhead, or the seed of the Kama Gayatri. The object is Krishna, who is the evergreen Cupid, and by utterance of Klim, Krishna is worshipped. It is also stated in the Gopal Tapani Upanishad that when Krishna is spoken of as Cupid, one should not think of him as the Cupid of this material world. As already explained, Vrindavan is the spiritual abode of Krishna, and thus the word Cupid is also spiritual and transcendental when applied to Krishna. One should not take the material Cupid and Krishna to be on the same level. The material Cupid increases the attraction of the external flesh and body, but the spiritual Cupid increases the attraction the supersoul exerts upon the individual soul. Actually, lust and the sex urge are there in spiritual life, but when the spirit soul is embodied in material elements, that spiritual urge is expressed through the material body and is therefore pervertedly reflected. One who actually becomes conversant with the science of Krishna consciousness can understand that his material desire for sex is abominable, whereas spiritual sex is desirable. Spiritual sex is of 2 kinds. One in accordance with the constitutional position of the self, and the other in accordance with the object. When one understands the truth about this life, but is not completely cleansed of material contamination, he is not factually situated in the transcendental abode, Vrindavan, although he may understand spiritual life. In this stage, he can utter the Kama Gayatri with the Kama Bij. When, however, he becomes free from all bodily sex urges, he can actually attain the supreme abode of Vrindavan. Ramananda Roy then explained that Krishna is attractive for both men and women, for the moving and the non-moving, indeed for all living entities. For this reason, he is called the Transcendental Cupid. Ramananda Roy then quoted a verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:32-2, stating that when the Lord appeared before the damsels of Vraj, smiling and playing on his flute, he appeared just like Cupid. The different kinds of devotees of the Supreme Lord have different aptitudes and relationships with him. Any relationship with the Lord is as good as any other, because the central point is Krishna. In this connection, there is a nice verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1:1:1 that states, quote, Krishna is the reservoir of all pleasures, and he is always attracting the gopis, by the spiritual luster of his body. He especially attracts Taraka, Pali, Shyama, and Lalita. Krishna is very dear to Radharani, the foremost gopi, unquote. Like Krishna, the gopis are glorified by Krishna's pastimes. There are different kinds of relationships with Krishna, and anyone who is attracted to Krishna in a particular mellow is glorious. Krishna is so beautiful, transcendental, and attractive that he sometimes attracts even himself. The following verse appears in Gita Govinda 1:11. Vish Visham Anuranjanena Janayan Anandam Indivara Sreni Shyamala Komalair Upanayan Angair Anangot Savam Swachchandang Vraja Sundaribhir Adhit Aha Pratyangam Alingitaha Sringaraha Sakhi Murtiman Iva Madho Mugdho Hari Kridati. Quote, my dear friend, just see how Krishna is enjoying his transcendental pastimes in the spring by expanding the beauty of his personal body. His soft legs and hands, just like the most beautiful moon, are used on the bodies of the gopis. When he embraces different parts of their bodies, he is so beautiful, unquote. Krishna is so beautiful that he even attracts Narayana as well as the goddess of fortune. Let me reread that. Krishna is so beautiful that he attracts even Narayana as well as the goddess of fortune, who associates with Narayana. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:89-58, the Bhuma Purusha, Mahavishnu, told Krishna and Arjuna, quote, my dear Krishna and Arjuna, I have taken the Brahman's sons just to see you, unquote. Arjuna had attempted to save some youths who had died untimely at Dwarka, and when he failed to save them, Krishna took him to the Bhuma Purusha. When the Bhuma Purusha brought forth those dead youths as living entities, he said, quote, both of you appeared in order to preserve religious principles in the world and to annihilate the demons, unquote. In other words, the Bhuma Purusha, being also attracted by the beauty of Krishna, concocted this pastime just as a pretext to see him. It is recorded in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:16-36 that after the serpent Kaliya was punished by Krishna, one of Kaliya's wives told Krishna, quote, dear Lord, we cannot understand how this fallen serpent got the opportunity of being kicked by your lotus feet when even the goddess of fortune underwent austerities for many years just to see you, unquote. How Krishna is attracted by his own beauty is described in the Lalita Madhava 8:34. Upon seeing his own picture, Krishna lamented, quote, how glorious this picture is. It is attracting me, just as it attracts Radharani, unquote. After giving a summary description of Krishna's beauty, Ramananda Roy began to speak of his spiritual energies headed by Srimati Radharani. Krishna has immense energetic expansions, of which three are predominant: the internal energy, the external energy, and the marginal energy, comprising the living entities. This threefold division of energies is confirmed in the Vishnu Purana 6.761, where it is said that Vishnu has one spiritual energy which is manifested in three ways. When the spiritual energy is overwhelmed by ignorance, it is called the marginal energy. As far as the spiritual energy itself is concerned, it is exhibited in three forms because Krishna is a combination of eternity, bliss, and knowledge. As far as his bliss and peacefulness are concerned, His spiritual energy is manifested as the pleasure-giving potency. His eternity is a manifesting energy, and his knowledge is manifested as spiritual perfection. As confirmed in the Vishnu Purana 1.12.69, quote, "The pleasure potency of Krishna gives Krishna transcendental pleasure and bliss," unquote. Thus, when Krishna wants to enjoy pleasure, he exhibits his own spiritual potency known as Ahladini. In his spiritual form, Krishna enjoys his spiritual energy, and that is the sum and substance of the Radha-Krishna pastimes. These pastimes can be understood only by elevated devotees. One should not try to understand that Radha-Krishna potencies and pastimes from the mundane platform. Generally, people misunderstand these as being material. When the pleasure potency is further condensed, it is called Mahabhava. Srimati Radharani, the eternal consort of Krishna, is the personification of that Mahabhava. In this regard, in the Ujjvala Nilamani 4.3, Rupa Goswami states that there are two competitors in loving Krishna, Radharani and Chandravali. When they are compared, it appears that Radharani is superior, for she is Mahabhava Swarup. The term Mahabhava Swarup, quote, the personification of Mahabhava, unquote, is applicable to Radharani only and no one else. Mahabhava is full of the pleasure potency, and it is an exhibition of the highest love for Krishna. Radharani is therefore known throughout the world as the most beloved of Krishna, and her name is always associated with Krishna as Radha Krishna. The Brahma Samhita 5.37 also confirms that Krishna expands himself by his pleasure potency in the spiritual world, and that these potencies are all non-different from him, the absolute truth. Although Krishna is always enjoying the company of his pleasure potency expansions, he is all-pervading. Therefore, Brahma offers his respectful obeisances to Govinda, the cause of all causes. As Krishna is the highest emblem of spiritual perfection, so Radharani is the highest emblem of the spiritual pleasure potency meant for satisfying Krishna. Krishna is unlimited, and Radharani is also unlimited in her ability to satisfy him. Krishna is satisfied just by seeing Radharani, but Radharani expands herself in such a way that Krishna desires to enjoy her more. Because Krishna was unable to estimate the pleasure potency of Radharani, he decided to accept the role of Radharani, and that combination of Krishna and Radharani is Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. Ramananda Roy then began to explain how Radharani is the supreme emblem of Krishna's pleasure potency. Radharani expands herself in different forms, known as Lalita, Vishakha, and her other confidential associates. In his Ujjvala Nilamani, Rupa Goswami explains that one of the characteristics of Srimati Radharani is that her body is an evolution of transcendental pleasure. That body is decorated with flowers and fragrant aromas and is complete with transcendental love for Krishna. Indeed, that body is the personification of his pleasure potency. Radharani bathes her transcendental body 3 times. First, in the water of mercy, second, in the water of youthful beauty, and third, in the water of youthful luster. After she bathes 3 times in that way, her body is covered with shining garments and decorated with her personal beauty, which is compared to cosmetics. Thus, her beauty constitutes the highest artistry. Her body is also decorated with the ornaments of spiritual ecstasy: trembling, shedding of tears, perspiring, choking of the voice, cessation of all bodily functions due to transcendental pleasure, standing up of the bodily hairs, changing of bodily color, and madness. The decorative transcendental pleasure potency manifests 9 symptoms. 5 of these are manifested by the expansion of Radharani's personal beauty, which is adorned with garlands of flowers. Her patient calmness is compared to a covering of cloths which have been cleansed by camphor. Her confidential agony for Krishna is the knot in her hair, and the mark of tilak on her forehead is her good fortune. Radharani's sense of hearing is eternally fixed on Krishna's name and fame. Chewing betel nuts makes one's lips reddish. Similarly, Radharani's complete attachment to Krishna has blackened the borders of her eyes. This darkness might be compared to ointment produced by Radha's joking with Krishna. Radharani's smile is just like the taste of camphor. The garland of separation moves on her body when she lies down on the bed of pride within the room of aroma. Her breasts are covered by the blouse of anger, born of her ecstatic affection for Krishna. Her reputation as the best of all Krishna's girlfriends is the stringed instrument she plays. When Krishna stands in his youthful posture, she puts her hand on his shoulder. Although she possesses so many transcendental qualities, she is still always engaged in the service of Krishna. Srimati Radharani is decorated with Suddipta Sattvika emotions, which sometimes include jubilation and sometimes pacification. All the transcendental ecstasies are manifested in the body of Srimati Radharani. Suddipta Sattvika emotions are manifest when a lover is overwhelmed with certain feelings which he or she cannot check. Radharani has another emotion called Kila Kinchita, which is manifest in 20 different ways. These emotions are manifested partly due to one's body, partly due to one's mind, and partly due to habit. As far as the bodily emotions are concerned, they are manifested in posture and movement. As far as the emotions of the mind are concerned, they are manifested as beauty, luster, complexion, sweetness, talking, magnanimity, and patience. As far as habitual emotions are concerned, they are manifested as pastimes, enjoyment, preparing for separation, and forgetfulness. The tilak of good fortune is on the forehead of Srimati Radharani, and she also has a locket of Prema Vaichitya. Prema Vaichitya is manifest when a lover and beloved meet and fear separation. Srimati Radharani is 15 days younger than Krishna. She always keeps her hand on the shoulder of one of her friends, and she always talks and thinks of pastimes with Krishna. She always offers Krishna a kind of intoxicant by her sweet talks, and she is always prepared to fulfill all his desires. In other words, she supplies everything needed to meet all the demands of Sri Krishna, and she possesses unique and uncommon qualities for Krishna's satisfaction. A nice verse in the Govinda Lilamrita 11.122 states, quote, "Who is the breeding ground of affection for Krishna? The answer is that it is only Srimati Radhika. Who is Krishna's dear most lovable object? The answer is that it is only Srimati Radhika and no one else. Sheen in the hair, moisture in the eyes, firmness in the breasts, all these qualities are present in Srimati Radhika. Therefore, only Srimati Radhika is able to fulfill all the desires of Krishna. No one else can do so." Unquote. Satyabhama is a competitor of Srimati Radharani's, but she always desires to come to the standard of Srimati Radharani. Radharani is so expert in all affairs that all the damsels of Vraj come to learn arts from her. She is so extraordinarily beautiful that even the goddess of fortune and Parvati, the wife of Lord Shiva, desire elevation to her standard of beauty. Arundhati, who is known as the most chaste lady in the universe, desires to learn the standard of chastity from Srimati Radharani. Since even Lord Krishna cannot estimate Radharani's highly transcendental qualities, it is not possible for an ordinary man to estimate them. After hearing Ramananda Roy speak of the qualities of Srimati Radharani and Krishna, Lord Caitanya desired to hear from him about the reciprocal exchange of love between them. Ramananda Roy described Krishna as Dhira Lalita, a word indicating a person who is very cunning and youthful, who is always expert in joking, who is without anxiety, and who is always subservient to his girlfriend. Krishna is always engaged in loving affairs with Radharani, and he takes to the bushes of Vrindavan to enjoy his lusty activities with her. Thus, he successfully carries out his lusty instincts. In the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it is stated, quote, "By his impudent and daring talks about sex indulgence, Krishna obliged Srimati Radharani to close her eyes, and, taking advantage of this, Krishna painted many pictures on her breasts. These pictures served as subject matter for Radharani's friends to joke about. Krishna was always engaged in such lusty activities, and thus he made his youthful life successful." Unquote. Upon hearing of these transcendental activities, Lord Caitanya said, quote, my dear Ramananda, what you have explained regarding the transcendental pastimes of Sri Radha and Krishna is perfectly correct. Yet there is something more I would like to hear from you." Unquote. Quote, "It is very difficult for me to express anything beyond this," Ramananda Roy replied. "I can only say that there is an emotional activity called Prema Vilas Vivarta, which I may try to explain, but I do not know whether you will be happy to hear of it." Unquote. In Prema Vilas, there are two kinds of emotional activities, meeting and separation. This transcendental separation is so acute that it is actually more ecstatic than meeting. Ramananda Roy was expert in understanding these highly elevated dealings between Radha and Krishna, and in this regard he had composed a nice song which he narrated to the Lord. The purport of the song is that the lover and the beloved, before meeting, generate a kind of emotion by the exchange of their transcendental activities. That emotion is called raga, or attraction. Srimati Radharani noted that, quote, "This attraction and affection between us has risen to the highest extent," unquote. But the cause of this attraction is Radharani herself. Quote, "Whatever the cause may be," Radharani said, "that affection between you and me has mixed us in oneness. Now that it is the time of separation, I cannot see the history of the evolution of this love. There was no cause or mediator in our love save our meeting itself and the exchange of feelings through our glances." Unquote. This exchange of feelings between Krishna and Radharani is very difficult to understand unless one is elevated to the platform of pure goodness. Such transcendental reciprocation is not possible to understand even from the platform of material goodness. One has to transcend even material goodness in order to understand. This is because the exchange of feelings between Radha and Krishna is not a subject matter of this material world. Even the greatest mental speculators cannot understand this directly or indirectly. Material activities are manifested for either the gross body or the subtle mind. But this exchange of feelings between Radha and Krishna is beyond such manifestations and beyond intellectual mental speculation. It can be understood only with purified senses freed from all the designations of the material world. Those who have purified senses can understand these transcendental features and exchanges. But those who are impersonalists and who have no knowledge of spiritual senses can only discriminate within the scope of the material senses and thus cannot understand spiritual exchanges or spiritual sensual activities. Those who are elevated by virtue of experimental knowledge can only satisfy their blunt material senses, either by gross bodily activities or by mental speculation. Everything generated from the body or the mind is always imperfect and perishable, but transcendental spiritual activities are always bright and wonderful. Pure love on the transcendental platform is the paragon of purity, because it is devoid of material affection and is completely spiritual. Affection for matter is perishable, as indicated by the inebriety of sex in the material world. But there is no such inebriety in the spiritual world. Hindrances on the path of sense satisfaction cause material distress, but one cannot compare that with the spiritual distress of separation from Krishna. In such spiritual separation, there is neither inebriety nor ineffectiveness, as one finds with material separation. Lord Caitanya said that this is the highest position of transcendental loving reciprocation, and he told Ramananda Roy, quote, "By your grace only have I been able to understand such a high transcendental position. Such a position cannot be attained without the performance of transcendental activities, so will you kindly explain to me how I can raise myself to this platform?" Unquote. Quote, "It is similarly difficult for me to make you understand," Ramananda Roy replied. "As far as I am concerned, I can only speak what you wish me to, for no one can escape your supreme will. Indeed, there is no one in the world who can surpass your supreme will, and although I appear to be speaking, I am actually not the speaker, you are. Therefore, you are both the speaker and the audience. Thus, let me speak only as you will me to speak about the activities required to attain this highest transcendental position." Unquote. Ramananda Roy then began his explanation saying that the transcendental activities of Radha and Krishna are very confidential. These activities cannot be understood by one who has an emotional relationship with the Supreme Lord as servant to master, friend to friend, or parent to son. This confidential subject matter can be understood only in the association of the damsels of Vraj. For these confidential activities have arisen from the feelings and emotions of those damsels. Without the association of the damsels of Vraja, one cannot nourish or cherish such a transcendental understanding. In other words, because these confidential pastimes of Radha and Krishna have expanded through the mercy of the damsels of Vraj, without their mercy one cannot understand them. One has to follow in the footsteps of the damsels of Vraj in order to understand. When one is actually situated in that understanding, he becomes eligible to enter into the confidential pastimes of Radha and Krishna. For one who wants to understand these confidential pastimes, there is no alternative to following in the footsteps of the damsels of Vraj. This is confirmed in the Govinda Lilamrita 10:17. Quote, Although manifest, happy, expanded, and unlimited, the emotional exchanges between Radha and Krishna can be understood only by the damsels of Vraj or their followers. Just as no one can understand the expansion of the spiritual energy of the Supreme Lord without his causeless mercy, no one can understand the transcendental sex life between Radha and Krishna without following in the footsteps of the damsels of Vraj. Unquote. The associates of Radharani include her personal associates, called Sakhis, and her near assistants, called Manjaris. It is very difficult to express the dealings of Radharani's associates with Krishna because they have no desire to mix with him or enjoy with him personally. Rather, they are always ready to help Radharani associate with Krishna. Their affection for Krishna and Radharani is so pure that they are simply satisfied when Radha and Krishna are together. Indeed, their transcendental pleasure is in seeing Radha and Krishna united. The actual form of Radharani is just like a creeper embracing the tree of Krishna. And the damsels of Vraj, the associates of Radharani, are just like the leaves and flowers of that creeper. When a creeper embraces a tree, the leaves and flowers of the creeper automatically embrace it. The Govinda Lilamrita 10:16 describes the pleasure of Radharani's associates as follows, quote, Radharani, the expansion of the pleasure potency of Krishna, is compared to a creeper, and her associates, the damsels of Vraj, are compared to the flowers and leaves of that creeper. When Radharani and Krishna enjoy themselves, the damsels of Vraj relish the pleasure more than Radharani herself. Unquote. Although the associates of Radharani do not expect any personal attention from Krishna, Radharani is so pleased with them that she arranges individual meetings between Krishna and the damsels of Vraj. Indeed, Radharani tries to unite her associates with Krishna by many transcendental maneuvers, and she takes more pleasure in these meetings than in her own meetings with him. When Krishna sees that both Radharani and her associates are pleased by his association, he becomes more satisfied. Such loving reciprocation has nothing to do with material lust, although it resembles the material union between man and woman. Because of that similarity, such reciprocation is sometimes called, in transcendental language, transcendental lust, as confirmed in the Gautamiya Tantra. Lust means attachment to one's personal sense gratification. But as far as Radharani and her associates are concerned, they have no desire for personal sense gratification. They only want to satisfy Krishna. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:31-19 in a verse spoken by the gopis among themselves. Yat te sujata chara nam buruhang staneshu bitaha shana ihi Priya dadhimahi karkasheshu tenat davim atasi tad vyatate naking sweet kur padibir brahmatidir bavad ayushang naha. Quote, My dear friend Krishna, you are now roaming in the forest with your bare feet, which you sometimes keep on our breasts. When your feet are on our breasts, we think that our breasts are too hard for your soft feet. Now you are wandering in the forest and walking over rough stones, and we do not know how you are feeling. Since you are our life and soul, the displeasure you are undergoing in traveling over the rough stones is giving us great distress. Unquote. Such feelings expressed by the damsels of Vraj constitute the highest Krishna-conscious emotions. Anyone who actually becomes captivated by Krishna consciousness approaches this level of the gopis. There are 64 categories of regulated devotional service, the performance of which helps one rise to the gopi stage of unconditional devotion. Affection for Krishna on the level of the gopis is called ragatmika, spontaneous love. When one enters into a spontaneous loving affair with Krishna, there is no need to follow the Vedic rules and regulations. There are various kinds of personal devotees of Lord Krishna in the transcendental abode. For example, there are servants of Krishna like Raktaka and Patraka, and friends of Krishna like Sridama or Subala. There are also Krishna's parents, Nanda and Yashoda. All these personal devotees are engaged in his service according to their respective transcendental emotions. One who desires to enter into the supreme abode of Krishna can take shelter of one of such transcendental servitors. Then, through the execution of loving service, one can ultimately attain transcendental affection for Krishna, the highest goal. In other words, the devotee in this material world, who executes loving service in pursuance of the activities of the eternal associates of Krishna, attains the same post when he is perfected. The sages, known as the Srutis, the personified Upanishads, also desired the post of the gopis, and they also followed in the footsteps of the gopis in order to attain that highest goal of life. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:87-23, where it is said that in general sages control their mind and senses by practicing pranayama, control of the breathing process, and mystic yoga. Thus they try to merge into the supreme Brahman. But this same goal is attained by atheists who deny the existence of God, if they are killed by an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They also merge into the Brahman existence of the Supreme Lord. But the damsels of Vrindavan worship Sri Krishna, having been bitten by him just as a person is bitten by a snake. For Krishna's body is compared with the body of a snake. A snake's body is never straight, it is always curved. Similarly, Krishna often stands in a three-curved posture, and he has bitten the gopis with transcendental love. The gopis are certainly better situated than all mystic yogis, and others who desire to merge into the supreme Brahman. Therefore, the sages, known as the Srutis, followed in the footsteps of the damsels of Vraj in order to attain a similar position. One cannot attain that position simply by following the regulative principles. Rather, one must seriously follow the principles of the gopis. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 10:9-21, wherein it is stated that Lord Sri Krishna, the son of Srimati Yashoda, is not easily available to those following the principles of mental speculation, but is very easily available to all kinds of living beings who follow the path of spontaneous devotional service. There are many pseudo-devotees, claiming to belong to Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu's sect, who artificially dress themselves as the damsels of Vraj. This is not approved by advanced spiritualists or advanced students of devotional service. Such people dress the outward material body because they foolishly confuse the body with the soul. They are mistaken when they think that the spiritual bodies of Krishna, Radharani, and their associates, the damsels of Vraj, are composed of material nature. One should know perfectly well that all such manifestations are expansions of the eternal bliss and knowledge in the transcendental world. They have nothing to do with these material bodies. Thus, the bodies, dresses, decorations, and activities of the damsels of Vrindavan do not belong to this material cosmic manifestation. The damsels of Vrindavan are not a subject for the attraction of those in the material world. They are the transcendental attractions for the all-attractive Krishna. Because the Lord is all-attractive, he is called Krishna. But the damsels of Vrindavan are attractive even to Krishna. Therefore, they are not of this material world. If one wrongly thinks that the material body is as perfect as the spiritual body, and thus begins to worship Krishna by imitating the damsels of Vrindavan, he becomes infested with Mayavad, impersonal philosophy. The impersonalists recommend a process of ahangara hopasana, by which one worships his own body as the supreme. Thinking in this way, such pseudo-transcendentalists dress themselves as the damsels of Vraj. Such activities are not acceptable in devotional service. Srila Jiva Goswami, the most authoritative acharya in the Gaudiya Sampradaya, has condemned these imitators. The process of transcendental realization is to follow in the footsteps of the associates of the Supreme Lord. Therefore, to think oneself a direct associate of the Supreme Lord is condemned. According to authorized Vaishnava principles, one should follow a particular devotee and not think of himself as Krishna's associate. In this way, Ramananda Roy explained that one should accept the mood of the damsels of Vraj. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is clearly said that one should accept the emotional activities of the associates of Krishna, not imitate their dress. One should also always meditate upon the dealings between Radha and Krishna in the transcendental world. One should think of Radha and Krishna 24 hours a day and exchange in their service within one's mind. One should think of Radha and Krishna 24 hours a day and engage in their service within one's mind, not externally change one's dress. By adopting the mood of the associates and friends of Radharani and following in their footsteps, one can ultimately achieve the perfectional stage of being transferred to Goloka Vrindavan, the transcendental abode of Krishna. By adopting this emotional mood of following in the footsteps of the gopis, one attains his siddha deha. This word indicates the pure spiritual body, which is beyond the senses, mind, and intelligence. The siddha deha is the purified soul who is just suitable to serve the Supreme Lord. No one can serve the Supreme Lord as his associate without being situated in his perfectly pure spiritual identity. That identity is completely free from all material contamination. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita, a materially contaminated person transmigrates to another material body by material consciousness. At the time of death, he thinks materially and is therefore transferred to another material body. Similarly, one who at the time of death is situated in his pure spiritual identity thinks of the spiritual loving service rendered to the Supreme Lord and is transferred to the spiritual kingdom to enter into the association of Krishna. In other words, the qualification for being transferred to the spiritual kingdom at the time of death is to think in one's spiritual identity of Krishna and his associates. No one can contemplate the activities of the spiritual kingdom without being situated in his pure spiritual identity, siddha deha. Thus, Ramananda Roy said that without attaining one's siddha deha, one can neither become an associate of the damsels of Vraj, nor render service directly to the personality of Godhead Krishna, and his eternal consort Radharani. In this regard, Ramananda quoted a nice verse from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:47-60. Nayang Sriyo Nga Unitanta Rate Prasadaha Swar Yoshitang Nalina Gandha Ruchang Kuto Nyaha Rasot Savesya Bhuja Danda Grihita Kanta Labdha Shishang Yaudagad Vraja Valabinam. Quote, neither the goddess of fortune Lakshmi nor the damsels of the heavenly kingdom can attain the facilities of the damsel of Vrajabhumi, and what to speak of others. Unquote. Lord Caitanya was very satisfied to hear these statements from Ramananda Roy, and he embraced him. Then, both of them began to cry in the ecstasy of transcendental realization. Thus, the Lord and Ramananda Roy discussed the transcendental pastimes of Radha and Krishna throughout the night, and in the morning they separated. Ramananda left to go to his place, and the Lord went to take his bath. At the time of separation, Ramananda fell at the feet of Lord Caitanya and prayed, quote, my dear Lord, you have come just to deliver me from this mire of nescience. Therefore, I request that you remain here for at least 10 days to purify my mind of material contamination. There is no one else who can deliver such transcendental love of God. Unquote. The Lord replied, quote, I have come to you to purify myself by hearing from you the transcendental pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I am so fortunate, for you are the only teacher of such transcendental pastimes. I can find no one else in the world who has realized the transcendental loving reciprocation between Radha and Krishna. You are asking me to stay here for 10 days, but I wish to remain with you for the rest of my life. Please come to Jagannath Puri, my headquarters, and we will remain together for the rest of our lives. Thus I can pass my remaining days in understanding Krishna and Radha by your association. Unquote.